Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow Season 11. It's been 11th season of empowering India's small businesses. I'm Sunanda Jayasheelan. On the show tonight, we're talking all about the green economy. First up, a conversation with Simple Energy, an R&D focused company that's working on the future of mobility that's both electric and connected. Also tonight, I'm in conversation with StepChange that's helping companies accelerate the transition to net zero much faster. My first interview today is with Simple Energy's Suhas Rajkumar, speaking to us about why they're so passionate that R&D has to go hand in hand with the future of mobility, how they're doing that, what the big opportunities are and the big ideas are for New India when it comes to the mobility space. Listen in.
Unchecked climate change could cost the global economy a whopping $178 trillion over the next 50 years. Sustainability isn't a buzzword anymore, but the path towards a net zero economy. Budget 2023 has focused on energy transition in a bid to encourage the adoption of cleaner energy sources. EVs are gaining traction as businesses competitively price their offerings and push for accessible infrastructure. With environmental, social, and governance needs taking precedence, businesses will have to incorporate these ESG principles into their accounting books, giving rise to carbon accounting and actualizing a green economy for all. In tonight's episode, we have two new age companies that share their insights on India's burgeoning EV market and how businesses can become ESG compliant. Joining us today are the founder and CEO of Simple Energy, Suhas Rajkumar, and Ankit Jain, CEO and co-founder of StepChange, elucidating on how India can achieve a circular economy.
Today we are here with Simple Energy in Bengaluru to really talk about the big ideas for New India when it comes to clean energy and also automation in the way the automobile industry is working. Now, before we talk about those big ideas, actually, I'd love for you to talk to our viewers about where you got started. You know, and in the offline chat we've had, you've spoken in depth about research and why you're passionate about R&D in the space. Where did you get started and where did the idea come about?
So we effectively started in 2018, where the first big boom, or you say that the bulb lit in our head.
Okay.
So that's where we started off as a company which can look into making energy efficient while making your mobility much more comfortable for you to experience on, and making EVs safer, right? So these three combinations we were focused on, and that's when we started with 8 people, and today we are 300 plus. With our factory inaugurated recently, we have a lab, we have a headquarters that we are talking in. So that's been a fair journey for us in the last 4 years. So why we started was fundamentally to make sure that AV industry as a whole moves towards a safer environment with a deep-rooted R&D culture in India, so that we can make vertical cost of the vehicle in more efficient, and we can bring in R&D culture in India, which is more focused in Western and European countries.
You have a big idea as far as clean energy, green hydrogen, clean electricity, and just changing how energy is manufactured, is managed, is consumed. And talk to us about that, but what are going to be those big opportunities through this interview that you can talk to our viewers about?
So we can, as India imports a lot of oil, right? So that is one form of energy that we use. Today also 70% of our electricity comes from coal. So the opportunities on this front of energy front is too high, because you have your clean future that you're looking forward in next 20-30 years. So that gives birth to your solar energy, wind energy, hydro, etc., where you can use those form of naturally available sources to convert them into a clean energy, right? So those projects can be an opportunity for any entrepreneur who's looking out there to solve, because they also come up with a hardware challenge that is energy storage systems, right? So those also are opportunity that you can look at. Apart from that, clean hydrogen is one of the future that India is looking at, to become energy independent from other countries. Okay. So that is where Honorable Prime Minister announced the green project, hydrogen mission that we've entered into that is more focused on the green hydrogen, where you can help the energy sector go towards hydrogen in a greener format, where you can help solve storage problems, where you can solve how do we generate green hydrogen through different various tech enablers that we can do it. So this is where the opportunity for a lot of entrepreneurs is, and we are 1.3 billion people, so it's a big market to serve. And it is a big focus that India should look at in going forward, and reduce our dependency on oil.
Absolutely. So speaking of green hydrogen, why haven't we adopted it faster perhaps? What are the challenges? What are, how long will it take for a large scale adoption?
See, hydrogen in a periodic table is much accessible, right? So hydrogen not a new concept. It's a very old concept. It's a basic electrolysis. You divide and you get hydrogen and water. But to do that, you need certain kind of electricity, right? So if you can generate that and do it, but that's not green, right? And hydrogen also has a problem of storage, right? First of all, you need to do the process to separate the hydrogen and generate it and then store it. So this cost of logistics has been too high for industries to operate on, and that is why we have not been able to shift towards hydrogen much faster. So I think this is where the opportunity lies, and if we can solve the logistic cost and effective storage systems for hydrogen, I think the entire sector will start moving towards it much faster than anticipated.
Okay, you are a company that uses technology and energy for the vehicle, the automotive and the automobile space. So let's talk about the automotive and the EV component really of it. You were mentioning that you're looking at a commercial launch in some time from now.
Yeah, a few weeks. We are looking at an official commercial launch of our Simple One. That has been awaited since last 2 years. We have crossed 1 lakh plus bookings on that front. And also we are most talked about scooter for range, performance, the kind of R&D that we do into the vehicle and making it smarter. So our focus is getting the scooters as soon as possible to consumer, with safety and quality aspects being the first priority in the scooters.
Pretty much everyone that you're talking to now in the automobile industry, from the biggest players who are the legacy players in the automobile space to companies like yourself, are innovating when it comes to the EV space. I would love for you to talk to our viewers about what your USP is going to be and how, and use that really to talk about an emerging industry like yours that's going to continue seeing more and more entrepreneurs entering it. How do you ensure that you maintain your USP and you're standing out in that sense?
So our USP lies in experience of the scooter itself, right? Where how do you generate a pleasant experience? By attacking the basic problems first, right? And customer first approach. So our USP will always be R&D. So we'll always invest, look at furthering the technological advancements that we have going forward, and not stop at where we are, right? So today we might have created the most effective energy storage systems or powertrain solutions, great vehicles, but they don't stop there. They need to get more efficient, much faster, much better, and much more delightful for a consumer to use. So our USP will always lie in R&D. And then it comes to other aspects of sales and distribution, etc.
I want to talk about R&D, and you've stressed that R&D is really going to be something that more and more companies need to look at, and there's perhaps not enough attention being paid to that. As an opportunity, can you talk about perhaps for this space, what are the opportunities that exist in R&D and why the focus should be on that?
India doesn't have that kind of infrastructure that is required for a company like us to operate. So we had to build it from scratch, right? Be it the supply chain, be it the quality of workforce, be it the training part of it, be investing in the machineries of it, right? So etc. So there's an opportunity on every front where you can, start training programs for engineers who can look into EVs as a future and look at expertising themselves into powertrain manufacturing, designing, operating, etc. And manufacturers can focus on component manufacturing like motor technology, controller technologies, or your electronics components as such, or looking at software development for EV specific, better battery management systems, better intelligence on the scooter or the vehicle itself. So there are opportunities on software, hardware, and manufacturing for India to look at, and that will only happen through R&D, because a lot of companies today outsource everything from China, etc., assemble here and sell something that is called EV.
Okay, you're saying 70% of players will perhaps have to fold out or consolidate, and what's that going to do to the pricing then of the EV space?
See, competition is not really deciding the pricing, it's more or less supply chain, right? So even if everyone goes out, there will be no monopoly that will come in, because everything is perfectly controlled by supply chain, unfortunately or fortunately for the industry. So supply chain will determine a lot of pricing, and then how the consumer looks at the product itself.
Have we learned our lessons from one, the pandemic put severe pressure on supply chains, two, you've had the Russia-Ukraine war and that concern really coming out on as far as, at least for the auto industry and supply chain. Have we learned our lessons? Has the auto industry sort of moved forward from there?
See, we have learned our lessons, but we cannot avoid them. They are something that is out of our control. I'm sure Indian government is investing a lot on how do we remove our dependencies on certain scenarios like this, because these are something that are not predicted. They're unfortunate, of course. But yeah, definitely automobile industry is much aware of the challenges now than they were before this. And they are strategically looking at securing the supply chain much better. But rest be assured, Simple Energy will not pass down those costs or anything else to the consumer.
Are more and more people aware in that sense of why they should be buying an EV? Are they more convinced in sense of the challenges of the logistical challenges of owning an EV? Whether it's charging, whether it's how long will my charge last for if I'm going to be using a vehicle, etc. Do you think some of those have been resolved?
So there is definitely a certain kind of education that has happened, but not entirely. People are more concerned on the safety side of it and the quality of it, right? Yeah. Because EVs are new. There's no long-term ownership reviews that has been done yet, which will definitely given a lot of confidence for new owners to adopt to the EV idea. But charging infra is a challenge. It's a chicken and egg problem again for the industry, whether there are more vehicles out there for the charging to come in, or should we just install and wait for the vehicles to come in. So we are, as a company, looking at both. We are not only going to solve the mobility part of it or the vehicle part of it, we're also going to solve the charging part of it. And we'll also educate consumers about how safer the scooters are and how effective that can become in your long-term ownership cost. Right, so this is where we are as a company looking at.
Do companies like yours perhaps, do you participate in that? Are you seeing the benefits really of the government's announcement on PLI?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the long term, yes, it is a very useful scheme that is common, and I hope there is more and more that comes in, because EV industry needs that support from the government to flourish. Without them, I think any industry wouldn't stand for the matter. But EV in an initial stage needs government's backing, so that we can help on the costing front and make EVs more accessible, affordable for the consumer going forward.
Okay, and all the very best to you.
Thank you so much.
More power to you. And look forward really to interviewing you next when you perhaps have more of these products really coming in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming down.
I'll take a quick break. When we come back, another company that's talking to us as far as the green economy is concerned, and that is StepChange. Back in just a moment. Do stay tuned. Welcome back with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. Tonight, we're continuing our conversations as far as the opportunities in the green economy are concerned for India's entrepreneurs. My second interview tonight is with Ankit Jain of StepChange, talking to us about how they're working with some of the largest companies to help them transition to net zero faster, what they mean by carbon accounting, and also what the benefits are really of becoming ESG compliant, which is a good to do, not a must to do at this point. It'll soon become that. What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? All of that in tonight's conversation. Listen. Ankit, thanks so much for joining us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow, season 11, talking about really something that has become now an essential conversation to have, not just a nice conversation to have, and that's as far as the green economy is concerned, and what entrepreneurs like yourself are doing to really, in some sense, really capitalize on the opportunities, but also to walk the talk when it comes to green living and the green economy. Before we come to talking about green accounting, carbon footprint, and what companies are doing towards that, my first question, just help us understand a little more about StepChange. We are here in your office in Bangalore, really trying to understand the opportunity which exists and how you're really playing in that field.
Sure. I'll just also quickly introduce myself. My name is Ankit, and my background's I've been a technologist most of my life. Used to run an electric vehicle company before starting StepChange about 2 years ago. So what StepChange is really trying to do is help consumers and companies find their path to net zero and accelerate their path to net zero. Right? Net zero, as you would agree, is becoming mandatory to some extent, right? We know the world needs to move to net zero by 2050. Governments agree on that, and hence most large companies, financial institutions are starting to set those goals. As they set those goals, they will need help in making that transition happen. What decisions can they take that are more sustainable? How they can change their operations, how they can move to a more sustainable supply chain. So that's what we help with. We call ourselves a climate decision-making tool company.
Okay, so you're talking about net zero. For those of our entrepreneurs who are wondering, where are we at in India when it comes to moving towards net zero? What are companies doing? What are small businesses doing? I know it's a lot to pack into one answer, but just give us the brief response to that to say, where are we on this path?
So first of all, starting from the top, the government has set a net zero goal for 2070, right? They've also set certain goals for 2030, right? We have NDCs of 45% reduction in carbon intensity of our GDP, right? That's a big goal, and that's a very near-term goal. So the government has essentially started asking large organizations as a starting point to start moving towards net zero. The way you see that is SEBI has mandated that the top 1,000 listed entities in India have to report their ESG for the first time this financial year. And the moment you start reporting, you're expected to start reducing, right? As a responsible company, you cannot be reporting your emissions and just showing increase, right? So as soon as that happens, we will start to see a lot of the large enterprises starting to move. As they start to move, they will ask their supply chain to start moving. And that's when we'll see SMEs, which are, I would say, a few years away from really starting to move towards net zero.
Let's talk about what you mean by carbon accounting and really keeping that in mind for small businesses. And perhaps we can break it up as we're talking about the big ideas for a new India when it comes to the green economy. What are the 2 or 3 things that you think are really going to change the way business is done? First and foremost, let's talk about, like I mentioned, carbon accounting. What is that? How is it going to work? What should companies keep in mind?
Any type of action a company does leaves some sort of environmental impact, right? Employees coming to office, your business travel, you're burning fuels, whether it's diesel in your cars or in your generators, using electricity, which is, so any action, things you buy, the way your products are consumed leaves an environmental impact. So you have to figure out some way of measuring all of that impact. So there's a GHG protocol which recommends exactly how you go about measuring it. There's something called Scope 1 emissions, Scope 2 emissions, Scope 3 emissions. Right? Scope 1 and Scope 2 are directly in your control. They are within sort of your boundary as a company. And Scope 3 extends beyond that boundary. It includes your employees, it includes your suppliers, it includes your consumers, etc. So when you think about carbon accounting, you first start usually with Scope 1 and Scope 2. And that's mandated by SEBI for the largest companies. And that's where most SMEs will also start. Sure. Scope 3 will start happening, 1 or 2 years down the line as companies build systems, build the capability of really starting to measure Scope 3. And that's where companies like us come in, right? Is how do we help you not just with your Scope 1 and 2, but also the complex Scope 3 emissions, which are quite hard to measure.
But what are going to be the benefits for me? Are there any financial benefits? Are there any cost savings? What would you have to say?
There are a lot of benefits, right? And of course, depends on the context of the company. For certain companies, this is just their future, right? If you're an automotive company, right, you have to move to electric vehicles. You cannot just keep making ICE vehicles. Yeah. Right? So that's just
for your very
part
existence.
For your very existence, you need to move, right? For certain other companies, it will become about brand, right? Consumers care about the environment. They want to buy more sustainable products. So you're seeing a lot of apparel companies talk about sustainable fashion. So that you'll see a lot of consumer companies starting to do this more because consumers will start moving. If you don't do it, you lose market share, right? For many others, it will be a mix of compliance and cost of capital. right? So if you are an ESG compliant company, if you are scoring well on your ESG ratings, you will see that it's easier for you to raise equity. You can raise debt at lower costs, right? And that's how you really start benefiting financially from being a more ESG compliant company.
What are the challenges though? As you're moving to this different way of working like we're talking about.
So when you think about green economy, and specifically in case of companies, the challenges are the following, right? One is just measuring where you stand today. As I was saying, scope 3 is incredibly complex. But if you don't understand scope 3, you can't really transition to being to net zero, to being a green company. So that's one challenge. Second is challenge around talent. Where do you find people who even understand all of this? Right? And how do you train them? How do you hire them? All of that has to be figured out. The third is moving and becoming more sustainable internally. Actions you can directly control, right? How can your employees become more sustainable? How can you use more renewable energy? How can you move into your own operations? The fuel that you burn can be. And lastly, which is what you were alluding to, is how do you make your supply chain more sustainable, right? So if you're an EV company, where do you get the batteries from? Where do you get the motors from? How do you get all of that sorted? I think that is, the transition is going to be the biggest challenge of them all. But I think the intent is there, right? At the top level, at the company level, most boards that we've talked to are talking about this. They know this is the future. So that's half the battle won, right? And now it's really about starting to make it happen on the ground.
What is going to be the role of technology, AI, digital, when it comes to ESG?
Every subsector of the economy, whether that's banking, whether that's different types of manufacturing sectors, whether that's FMCG, whether that's textile, all of them will have to transition, and technology will enable that.
If you had a piece of advice for any of our entrepreneurs?
My advice to my fellow entrepreneurs would be to take any subsector of the economy you understand deeply and find a way to get that to net zero, right? The opportunity is everywhere, right? And the challenges are immense. But if you can solve that challenge, the economic opportunity also is amazing.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Out of time on today's show. If you have any feedback for us, do let us know. Our details on your screens as we speak. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.